Hey guys, Paul here. This video is aimed at two demographics. One is religious people who look at people who don't believe in God and say, well, life is completely meaningless and purposeless if there is no God in your life. And they just simply don't understand how people can live their lives without a belief in God and still, what is it that lets them keep going? And also, this is a video for actual people who don't believe in God, who actually don't find purpose and meaning in life, or those that do and don't find purpose and meaning in life. And it's an attempt to explain a few different perspectives on this topic. And I wouldn't really say how to find your purpose, but at least give you other perspectives to consider. Right? So people who were raised very religious or Christian, or people who were raised with very close relationship with their parents, they tend to be raised almost on a subconscious, on a very fundamental, low, as their ground foundation, that God is a necessity. God is what gives meaning to everything. God is what we live for, what we get our life from, what we strive for. And so that gets so embedded into everything, that we are living in order to please God. We're living in order to follow the commandments of God, obey God, and in return, as we do all these things, we're going to be rewarded, right, as we live this life this way. So if you came from that background and all of a sudden you're no longer of that background because you left for whatever reason, or let go of your beliefs, switched to agnostic or atheist, or got rid of religion and just don't know what's going on, you are going essentially through a deconstruction process. And at that point, everything does seem meaningless, because your whole life was based on the truth that all meaning and all purpose comes from a belief in God and pleasing God and obeying God and His commandments. And all of a sudden, that's no longer there. So it's like, what foundation are you standing on? How are you going to find meaning? How are you going to find purpose if there's no longer any objective standard by which to determine what life's for? And you're also in a position where you're like, I can't do it. I'm a subjective human being who has very little to know about this world, who has a very limited perspective on how things work. How in the world can I find meaning myself now that I don't have a reference point of God telling me what to do, if that has happened to you, right? So those of you who came from a religious background, and the reason why I mentioned people who are in close relationship with their parents is God is an authority figure, right? It's an abstract image of an authority figure over our lives. People who grew up in close relationship with their parents tend to stay religious for the rest of their lives. If you grew up with a close relationship with your parents, even if your parents were atheists, people who grew up and are still in a close relationship with their parents and raised in an atheist family still tend to be driven towards a certain religion, because the subconscious, even on a very, very fundamental level, growing up and having an authority figure that you trust, that loves you, whether your mom or dad or whoever your guardian was, as you grow up, that concept becomes abstract, and it gets abstracted out to an invisible image of someone up in the sky looking over all of humanity that you believe in. It may not be physical, it might be a spirit, but that spirit is a projection of the relationship that you have with the authority figure with who you grew up with. And on the other hand, vice versa happens, where if you grew up, again, I'm talking about generally speaking, there are exceptions to this rule, but generally speaking, painting with a broad brush stroke, if you didn't have an authority figure growing up, or you had a really bad authority figure that at some point you rebelled and want nothing to do with them, you don't want to have any kind of authority over your life, you rebelled against it, you didn't want your mom or dad to be your mom or dad anymore because you didn't like who they were or whatever, you tend to turn atheist, regardless of your background. If you're already atheist, you would get even more grounded in atheism, because that feeling of someone watching over you and being there, and this whole somebody's in control of this world, is just not there, because the people that were supposed to be there that you can look up to and trust weren't there. Therefore, that abstract concept towards an authority figure, that relationship with the authority figure gets projected out towards the entire world, and you start feeling like there is nobody watching anything, and you're on your own, because when you were a child, you had to figure it out on your own, and now you're an adult, and everybody needs to figure it out on their own, and stop believing in some imaginary God or father figure that's looking over everything, because there isn't one. In most cases, your belief or lack of belief in God is grounded in a projection of your relationship with the authority figure growing up, especially before 9 years old, right? But a lot of it is grounded in that. Anyway, how does this affect meaning and everything else? So if you have an authority figure, or had an authority figure, and you believe that there is something out there that is looking over the world, that gives you a sense of security, a sense of comfort, a sense of that somebody's in control, and at the end of this, there's a purpose and meaning that you may not know. Just like growing up, you had to trust your parents or whoever your guardian was to be there for you when things went wrong, to guide you, to tell you what to do, that there was an ultimate, they are gonna raise you up to be an adult. They're gonna raise you up to know how to function in this world, in this life. They were a trustworthy person you trusted. In the same way, you abstract that out and project it on a subconscious level towards the rest of the world, and all of a sudden you believe that the same thing is going to happen as you pass from this life. So instead of maturing to adulthood, you're expecting this to happen. Now you're expecting the same thing to happen, that when you mature from this life to the next, right? So that gets projected out towards the next life, and all of a sudden life has meaning and purpose, because even though everything might not make sense now, it will make sense in the future, because my father figure in heaven, or mother figure, depending on your belief, or this energy in heaven is going to guide me. And even though most things might not make sense now, they will make sense in the end, and I'm just going to trust them, just like I trusted my authority figure growing up, right? And on the other hand, if you grew up feeling that way and you lost that, and all of a sudden there is no father figure, it's like, oh, I'm on my own. Well, what the hell am I going to do now? Right? There's this sense of meaninglessness and sense of lack of purpose, so to say. So there's different ways that people battle with this and find purpose while avoiding the topic of there being a higher power. Obviously, believing in a higher power, believing in God, trusting that there is a God, trusting that there's something or someone out there that is in control ultimately, and you're going there, is the best way to give your life meaning and purpose, because it puts your soul at rest. It gives you peace, somewhat. It gives you enough solace that everything is going to be all right. That in itself already gives you a very solid foundation, that everything does not hinge on you, and it doesn't need to hinge on you, and everything's going to be all right. But if for some reason someone elects not to believe in that, where do they find purpose and meaning? Some people resort to pure pragmatism, right? So I tend to be one of those people that resorts to pure pragmatism, where you just do what works in the moment. So in the moment, I need to pay my bills. Therefore, I'm going to go into survival mode, earn money, and pay my bills. In the moment, I have children. I care about my children. I love my children. I want my children to be happy. And I will do whatever it takes to make my children happy. And I will focus on that. And what brings me joy? Doing something productive and helpful for other people. That's something that gives me joy. So doing services for other people, whether in return of money or even out of the kindness of my heart, volunteering, doing things like that brings me joy. Therefore, I will do it. Why? Because it feels like it benefits other people and does good to me. When I don't do certain things, or when I do the wrong things, it makes me feel bad. Therefore, I won't do it, because it just doesn't seem right. So your life just becomes of what works, right? It's a very pragmatic, very in the moment, very cause and effect approach of, okay, these are the things I currently value, regardless of where these values come from, regardless if there's some objective reason for them or not. It seems to me that this is the best way for me to live right now. Therefore, I will live this way, and I will make the best of it. And so that becomes the purpose and the meaning that you assign to your life if you have no one above in heaven to look to. And I found that majority of people who don't believe in God resort to pragmatism, and they don't concern themselves with the greater things of life. Well, like, by greater things, I mean like thinking about what happens after death, because they're like, well, that's unknowable, so why even think about that? And currently, these are the things that concern me, therefore I'm just going to focus on these things that concern me, and who cares about everything else? I have enough worries of my own. So pragmatism is one of them. Then there's reincarnation. Some of you guys are familiar with it. So they believe, like, hey, at the end of whether there is reincarnation, whether there's a God or there is reincarnation, I believe that God will weigh everything, and I will be rewarded for the person that I was, and whoever the judge is. Like, people make themselves feel that overall they follow their conscience most of the time, right? And I believe most people do. There are certain people that don't, but the great majority of people that I've met, that I've talked to, and I've had like personal, deep conversations with, most people really do feel like they follow their conscience most of the time. And majority of people actually do follow their conscience most of the time, because when you watch their lives, they have slip-ups here and there, but overall, they are always trying their best, and they believe that a just God is going to put everything on a scale of the good and the bad, and overall, they're going to be rewarded accordingly for the type of person they were. And so they take that approach, and then some of them believe in reincarnation, so they're like, well, I'm going to get weighed, whatever I deserve to return as, or whatever punishment I deserve, if that happens, I'll take it. Because hopefully there's justice out there, and even if there isn't, there's nothing I can do about it, because I'm living my life the way I'm living my life. And they're able to take that feeling and that thought, compartmentalize it, basically give a check mark to that question in their head that's constantly like questioning, oh, what's going to happen? What's the ultimate purpose? They're like, whatever the ultimate purpose is, and whatever I'm going to find after death that it is, I'm going to be okay with it. It's unknowable. I don't care about knowing it. I don't care about questioning it. I'm going to put that aside, and I'm just going to live my life based on my best judgment, right? A very subjective approach to life, but their purpose and their meaning comes from just doing the best they can and enjoying the short period of life that they have here on earth while they have it, regardless of whether, there is or there isn't judgment. So that's been compartmentalized, checkmarked, put into a little box. Whenever it happens, it happens. I'll worry about it when I have to worry about it when I die. Now I'm just going to live my life because I only have one, so I'm going to stop wasting my time trying to figure out something that's impossible to figure out. So again, so the pragmatists, they just don't even care to answer those questions. They just push them out of their head. Then there's the atheists or agnostics who answer it that I will be happy with whatever comes. They're able to compartmentalize it. And then they kind of resort to pragmatism, but also they kind of resort to hedonism, which is basically like doing things that they find pleasurable or happy in this life, and just try to maintain a certain level of happiness. And so that becomes their purpose in life, right? Because they're like, I have one, I may as well just enjoy it. So pragmatists, they kind of overlap, but pragmatists more do what works and fulfills their immediate needs, whereas the second one that compartmentalize it and say, I'm okay with whatever's going to happen if there is somebody out there, they tend to lean more, for the most part, towards the hedonistic side of doing things that they find more pleasurable for them. It's like a little bit more of a self-centered, selfish life, where they're like, I'm going to do my best, but I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm not going to live a life of just suffering and misery because I only have one, so why waste like suffering and misery when I could just avoid it altogether? All right, so there's two approaches. And then there's like a spiritualistic type side to people who, they don't really believe in anything, but they are a lot more in tune. I'd say like this is definitely the more creative, like liberal, creative type people who are more musically inclined or artistically inclined. They tend to, even if they don't believe in God, they might believe in some kind of energy out there. They might believe that something might be out there and somebody is watching over them. There is some power, even though they might not believe in a specific God or religion or abide by it. And so they tend to really live by intuition, right? So they go off of what they really, really feel deeply inside of them. They're usually a lot less consistent. They're usually a lot less stable through life because they're a lot more inclined to rely on intuition, and intuition is very strongly pushed by emotions, or like manipulated by emotions, and emotions change all the time. And I found myself being in this group of people too at some points in my life. But you basically end up being following what you in your deepest heart of hearts feel like is the right thing to do. So you have this conviction, and you may believe it comes from the world, or from the energy, or from Mother Earth, or just from our human nature, and you give it meaning and say, okay, this thing I feel that I must accomplish, it is my soul, wherever this soul originated, doesn't matter, telling me that this is what I need to pursue as a human being, and this is where I'm going to find my meaning, by opening up who I am inside, sharing with the world who I am as a person, expressing myself, and going and finding what I feel in the hardest of hearts, by exploring that to its ultimate depth, or to its ultimate end, and seeing where it leads me. And so their meaning and purpose comes from this almost arbitrary type belief that is based on this deep internal conviction or feeling of how they feel deep inside about who they are and the things they want to try and explore. And they go and they try and explore them, and then they see if it brings fulfillment or not. But also in the process of doing these things and like trying to fulfill that deep inner need or pull, they are constantly adjusting, right? So as they're doing it, and something that they don't like, something they thought that they were meant for but they don't like it, they start seeing more barriers along the way. They're like, you know what, maybe I don't want to do this. I want to do something else, because as I'm pursuing this thing I thought I was meant for, I'm realizing I don't really enjoy it. And so those people, the reason they end up switching their purpose and life and what they're meant for a lot is because no matter which way you pick to self-realize, oftentimes every single one of them comes with a lot of pain and suffering. And pain and suffering doesn't feel good, and it can be misinterpreted to mean that because I'm experiencing pain and suffering as I'm trying to pursue this thing, it means that maybe this isn't the thing for me. Because the way that I defined it to myself is that when I find my place in the world, it's gonna be something that brings me fulfillment, even if though I'm going through struggle. But unfortunately, most things, even if there's something that's perfectly suited for our personality, might turn into hell at some points. Just absolute miserable existence as we're dealing with some problems or some external factors that get introduced. And people who are more on the conservative, more analytical side, they tend to stick through things through thick and thin and be a lot more consistent, a lot more dedicated, a lot more obsessed with a certain goal they set for themselves, and they follow it through all the way to the end. Because for them, the end goal is what matters, and then the details they just figure it out as they go, and they don't really rely on their emotional ups and downs, because for them the end goal is the most important thing. This is a mentality a lot more accepted in the Eastern world, like in Russia where I come from. Like, their people are a lot more poker faced. They're a lot less moved by emotion and where they need to pursue. Culturally speaking, the culture is a lot more focused on the end goal and how you're going to get there, and they just set that goal, and no matter what hell they have to go through to get there, they try to get there, right? It's just a type of mentality. Anyway, going back to our discussion about meaning of life, those of us who actually, like, I identify as agnostic, right? I do not deny that there is a God out there. I do not deny that there might be, a power or some kind of consciousness or a singularity, whatever you want to call it, out there that is in control of our lives. The only thing that I say is I haven't, on a deep personal level, I don't see it in my life every day. Although there are sometimes some things happen that I'm like, you know what, that's too much of a coincidence. Maybe somebody is looking over my life. But at the end of the day, what I've elected to do and where I'm finding my meaning and purpose is extreme pragmatism. So I don't spend time philosophizing or dwelling for very long periods of time about things that are unknowable, right? So like what happens after death. I believe that is a completely unknowable thing. Or like stuff that we humans can't test and like go into, which again, you might even go and say, well, you can't even know that your reality is a reality. You might be asleep for all you know and like plugged into a matrix and this is the world you live in. Sure, yeah, there are things I accept by faith. And by faith, I don't know why, for what reason, for the chemistry in our brain, I accepted that certain axioms, like that I am living in a reality of my own that I'm experiencing now, that I have kids that I love, that I have bills to pay, and I want to have a place to live, and I want my life to look a certain way, and whatever it takes to get there is what I'm gonna do. And that becomes my meaning and purpose. And the question is, well, what if you do this until you die? Well, then I do it till I die, you know? And I tend to want to embrace every experience of life, both positive and negative, as part of the human experience, because I believe that the gift of life is a huge present given to us, and that we should be able to be grateful for all the ups and downs, and that we should embrace the pain and suffering that life brings, because it's part of the human experience. And this is like, in its own cruel and beautiful way, it's part of being human. And I'm very grateful to be in this life as a human being and being able to experience all this stuff. And I don't know where I came from, right, in the beginning. That's part of being an agnostic, is saying, like, you don't know. I don't know what happened and how I appeared on this earth. I mean, other than obviously, like, I was born, but, like, speaking from the very, like, Genesis, I don't know how it all appeared. I don't know how it all happened. I don't know all the predated history and how accurate it is, whether what they teach in historical documents or in religious texts. I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing. What I know is I'm here. I know in my soul how I feel about my everyday life, and I know spiritually the things that make me feel dirty and wrong on the inside, and I know things that make me feel happy and loved, or what the Bible describes as the fruit of the Spirit. And those are the things I tend to just try to stand by and live by. And so it's this pragmatism, doing what works, and then adjusting my behavior as we go on, and that becomes the meaning and purpose of the life itself, and being okay with there maybe not being somebody out there. So this is just an explanation, I guess, or a more in-depth discussion on this topic for people who either haven't really figured it out for themselves, or people who are just wondering, like, how can somebody being someone who's not fully obsessed with God, how can they be happy with their life? How can they find meaning and purpose because they don't have some kind of objective reference, right? And again, that's a discussion all on its own, because even your beliefs in Jesus and God, or Christianity or Islam, or whatever it is that you believe, it's all based on your subjective interpretation and your subjective understanding of it. So at the end of the day, your subjective interpretation becomes something that you label objective reference point. So but it is a projection of your subjective understanding. So you take a concept, God and Jesus Christ, or whatever that concept is, you articulate it with human language and words, which are symbols in themselves, because all human language is just sounds being produced that mean nothing to somebody who doesn't speak the language. So everything we say is literally just symbols of concepts that are abstract and that are not present in the words themselves. So you take that explanation that's been articulated, you put it and draw an image of it in your mind, whether like actual image that's visible or an image that's just an abstract idea of this is what God is and that's what the objective God is, and you label it and believe in it as your objective reference point, and you tell everybody, I have an objective reference point and you don't, because I believe in an objective God and I believe in this objective reference point. But that objective reference point is a subjective interpretation and projection that you've formed in your own subjective mind, put there and labeled it as such, and then told yourself that this is what it is and therefore I believe in it and it gives me peace and joy, which is 100% fine to do. There's nothing wrong with doing that, right? I'm just saying that all objective claims are subjective projections that you label objective claims that you then believe in as objective claims, even though at the end of the day, they are still your subjective articulation and mindfully formed idea in your own brain that you mark as objective. All this to say, we are all living subjective lives, and no matter how we frame them, at the end of the day, we have to find solace and happiness and meaning and purpose in the things that we do, and the foundation that we build for it is very different for every person. For some people, it's the Holy Scriptures. For some other people, it's the Islamic Quran and the Hadith and their writings. And for other people, is the Holy Sanskrit of the Hindu religions that they believe and they write down, or the Confucius teachings of the Buddhist branch. Whatever it is, right? Or the Tao Te Ching, or what is it called, of Taoism. Anyway, whatever people build as their foundation, at the end of the day, we have to build a subjective infrastructure foundation on which we're going to base all our beliefs, on which we're going to build our life, and at the end of the day, find solace in that whatever we are doing now is the best thing that we can be doing for ourselves. And that in itself becomes the purpose and meaning, right? What it is for me might be different for what it is for you, but it serves the same function, right? The function is to make you feel like what you're doing is important. That's the function of the foundation. Make you feel that what you're doing is important, it's worthwhile, and this is what we're going to do. Because if you don't build this foundation of what's worthwhile and meaningful and purposeful, you just kill yourself. Because nothing matters and nothing has any meaning or purpose. So you just don't pursue anything, because what's the point? So that foundation of purpose and meaning is extremely important. It is a very different foundation of meaning and purpose for every single religion and every single ideology, including mine. And I've built mine based on pragmatism and the things that I care about. And I made them my point of reference, whereas Christians make Jesus and God. I believe I've exhausted the whole topic of this conversation. I hope this helps some of you and answers the question of how can there be meaning and purpose without God. And this is my explanation and discussion with you. Hopefully generate a little bit of dialogue on where the meaning and purpose comes from and what it is. Thank you for watching, for your patience with this video. Feel free to share it with your friends. Feel free to start a discussion on this topic. I'd be happy to throw some ideas around. I'll put my fitness Discord below. There's a sub page that I'm going to create on that Discord with philosophical discussions. If y'all want to start discussing there, feel 100% free to do so. Thanks for watching. Paul here, Body, Mind, Soul, Spirit. See you later. Bye.